and welcome to the Face Downs, your source for TCG news and all things Yu-Gi-Oh! We are the only podcast in the world that does everything in one take. That's right. We've never recorded this episode before. Am I right, folks?
At all.
At all. I'm your host, Lucas.
I'm Ruben, and we are joined by the now permanent member,
Woo! Steve.
Steve.
Shadol
welcome.
Steve.
Hello.
Shadol Steve.
Hello and welcome.
That's Joe. But we're good.
How you doing?
Okay.
How you doing, Joe?
Not too bad. Just came off the weekend of Extravaganza number 2.
That's
in
right.
Palmy. And
How was that?
It was a big rogue fest again, but it was really cool.
I do like your deck breakdowns where it's just one of every kind of deck for 15 lines.
It literally is that. Like if you look at every single deck that was in the tournament, last week you could argue there was like a couple of decks that were like kind of under the same banner, but this week there was no one. Like it was 15 individual decks, and it was so cool to like see the duels happen. Because
What was top? What was like the top 5?
top
decks?
4.
Top 5. What am I talking about? Yeah, top 4.
Yeah, top 4 was Invoke Dogmatica,
Okay.
Time Lord, Prank Kids,
Okay.
and Stun.
Time Lord, you say?
What kind of stun?
Just straight up like Stun. It was like Dragoon, Inspector Border, Traps, Floodgates, that sort of stun.
Hateful,
Just
evil,
the
evil.
Dragoon challenge. Yeah.
the Dragoon.
Pretty
challenge.
much, yeah.
The
And it was
Turbo Red Eyes Fusion.
yeah, and like that was a pretty decent deck, but Time Lords took it out because of the Time Lord that like shuffles all back row in. Yep. That kind of dealt with that. Yeah.
Not in time. Yeah, the blue one.
I think I honestly don't know what they do.
No,
But I just saw I just looked at them and I'm like, wow, that's a good card. It just shuffles everything in. But yeah,
I know
so
I know you can make like Gustav Max with them.
yes, and I saw him like, so what he'll do is he'll like keep just shuffling everything back in, and then he'll just put them on a time clock, like, and then just like Gustav them every turn, and then they just lose. It was just so cool to watch. Like the guy who played it, I'll do a little shout out to him right now. He was actually stuck over in New Zealand since like 2019. So he's from Vietnam.
Because of Miss Rona.
Yeah, because of Rona. Like, and what happened is he was stuck over here since 2019, and his wife was back home, and like he's been trying like to get back ever since. And it was his last tournament here, so it was really cool to like see him top, and he came second in the end. It was like so close to like kind of like the fairy tale goodbye, but no, it was
Second
cool to
place
see.
with Time Lords.
Yeah. Anyway,
Man.
today's
Talk
topic.
about a throwback
Yeah, I was going
in
to say, it
time.
almost sounds like you could just take like, I don't know, 3 of a structure deck and do pretty good down in Palmy, don't you think?
Oh, I think he could. Yeah.
Yeah, God, what a coincidence. Because today's episode is about structure decks, and full disclosure, we've kind of already talked about this before. We did an episode like a while back on like us just kind of going over every structure deck that came out, which was fun, but we decided it would actually work out a lot better if we just focus in on, because we are meta players, the meta relevance of structure decks over the years of Yu-Gi-Oh! And how it's kind of impacted the development of the game. So, we've prepared a list, a very, smartly intelligent podcast prepared list of every relevant structure deck, and I definitely didn't miss any. Right?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think this list is super comprehensive. So we're just going to give a preface. Apologies if your favorite structure deck isn't here, just because you may believe that it had impact around your meta. We were taking results from like YCSs, regionals, and like speaking to the players that have been around since these structure decks came around, and like listening to their experiences, like top competitive strategies. Not to mention that a couple of these, won worlds / were worlds competitive. So I think although we might be holding structure decks to quite a high caliber, these are the ones that kind of rung through. These are the ones that really shone through and provided us with a really good basis to kind of like had this podcast discussion around.
And if you do want to get mad at us for leaving out your favorite structure deck, where can you contact us?
You could contact us at our email address. We have a brand new email address that you can send us all your question, qualms, and queries to. So that is, I believe it's thefacedowns@gmail.com. Sorry to all the Hotmail users out there. That is thefacedowns@gmail.com.
Hell yeah. We're looking to get one question. I think
Just one.
is all we're looking for. Just one, we'd be happy.
It could be about
Um,
anything as well, like even
literally
previous
anything.
podcasts.
Yeah. Go. Why didn't you talk about my favorite archetype, Dust-Ons?
Yeah. What did you have for lunch? I can see you through your apartment window. You know, normal questions.
Yeah.
Or how did you forget Dark Planet was a card?
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
and then
sending
I'll-
that email. I'm sending
I
that one.
actually, that's my email that I sent. I will be sending actually at Joe.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a really nice list of structure decks throughout history. Apologies for Lucas and I. We were not around when a lot of these came out. While I may have been a dedicated little fanboy on the internet, I guarantee you I was under the age of 15 when a lot of these decks came out.
Yeah.
But Joe, you were
Joe, you're
around.
old. Tell us.
You're old. Joe, you're old.
Damn it.
Um,
Everyone, you're old.
Again,
I don't say you're old.
I wasn't around. I'm so young.
I'm
Joe,
so
what do you
young,
think about
but
them?
Joe, what is your impressions on, these kind of the first couple of structure decks that are listed here? Do you want to start from the top of this list?
yeah. So Lost Sanctuary we have as the first one, and that one was obviously where Hyperion came out and the agents. It gave a toolbox sort of to like fairy plays and that sort of thing. It didn't really have anything beforehand. It was like Mystic Shine Ball and like I think it was the Venus, the one that's the one that gets that out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't have a lot going for it, and it still didn't afterwards, if I'm being honest. But it at least like brought these cards out and gave that deck potential, even for future, like even for the future now. Like, and I'm sure you guys have seen in the OCG with the Rewave.
So yeah, I think agents are a really interesting one because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think fairies were really ever a meta strategy in the past until this deck came out. Is
Not
that
really
a
that
safe
I can
assumption?
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, like Venus is a house, special summoning from deck, all your shine balls is such an incredible ability. I mean, literally took someone we know in Auckland to top 32 at a YCS. So like Venus is still impactful to this day. But the Lost Sanctuary deck gave you access to the Agent of Mystery Earth, which is a tuner. So tuners, obviously, this deck came out in a synchro time. So having really easy access to your synchros was really quite impactful. It partnered really well with, like you said, it was TGs. So this was a synchro-based archetype as well that had a lot of free summons from hand. Is that correct? If your opponent had cards, yeah.
So I did a bit of research into this deck being the oldest one on the list because I was kind of like agents, looking at they have got a Rewave coming out. What do they even do? So Mystery Earth is your quote-unquote Stratos, which searches Master Hyperion if you control Sanctuary in the sky. And the whole basis of the deck was you would like either normal the Earth, search Hyperion, pass, because, this is an older format. Or if you got really off to the races, you could normal summon the Venus, summon 2 mystical shine balls. And because this is like in the early Xyz era, you could use those shine balls to make a rank 2. Where you'd make Gachi Gochi Gantetsu. And it was kind of like one of those slow mid-range value decks, but Gachi Gochi Gantetsu just give you your fairies, I believe, or all monsters, an attack boost on the field.
Level 2 or lowers, yeah, something.
Yeah, and then you could pair that with the TG engine, which provided free tuners and free bodies to synchro with, to give the deck some explosive power. Like you'd summon the 3 shine balls plus a TG striker, that's an immediate level 8 synchro. So the deck was just really adaptable, and it did actually, Joe, you say it didn't have like a lot of success. It went to Worlds and almost won.
Yeah.
I think it only lost to...
I can find live research on the pod.
Was it Plant at that time, or was it like...
So this is
2000. You look that up while we talk about this deck.
11?
Yeah, that's probably why honestly I have to apologize. I don't really remember it all that well, just because like I think
That's
2011 is right towards the so I stopped playing. I went from sort of 2005 to about 2009, 2010, and that's where my break kind of came. So like I knew about them, and I looked at some of the cards like Christia and stuff like that back when I wasn't playing, and I was like, hey, they're cool cards. But to be honest, I didn't know all that much about them.
Yeah, so 2011, this deck won Worlds.
It won Worlds.
Yeah,
okay,
so Agent Fairies.
We've put no respect on this thing.
So
I'm
just Agent Fairies, because again, this is for reference for anyone listening. This is 10 years ago. This is over 10 years ago even. So yeah, this deck won Worlds. So truly, like the first structure deck kind of strategy that was like, oh, this is a competitive strategy. This is something that, as we discussed, it gave you really good value. it got you a bit more of a grind, and Hyperion was a very easy boss monster to summon. Like,
so Master Hyperion is just banish, I think, a fairy from grave to summon it. It's not an agent fairy, and it's just a big body. Like, that was kind of its gig. Like, it was just a big attacker you could summon for free over and over again.
Yeah, powerful. And to think again, like, this is a structure deck, so it was super accessible. We saw a lot of good fairy stuff in existence already. Things like Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen, which is just special summon a fairy from hand. Archlord Christia is a floodgate monster. Like, this is, fairies had a lot of good, powerful plays, but it was like this deck really just made it a bit more realistic to prove it, and taking it from that kind of rogue fairy strategy that you might have had at a local or hobbies.
And I think as well, it like also lays a good platform for the rewave, because like the cards already are good. Like they already have like quite strong players, and to build on what's already there, you'll find that like it has potential to then come into our meta game in a modern era. So I feel it's like one of those sorts of structure decks where if it gets a rewave, and hopefully we do get it over here at some point soon, like it would be really cool to see these old nostalgic cards come in for some people,
Absolutely. And I think, we can move on to a deck that you actually did play.
Yes.
Old Man Joe played Gates of the Underworld.
This was your returning deck.
This was
my return, yeah. So I can definitely talk about this one and ignore everything I said about the fairy one. So anyway, Gates of the Underworld, that was a deck where there was these Dark World cards that had come out years beforehand. And they kind of just didn't have anything going for them. They were like kind of a gimmick where if your opponent discarded them, you plussed, and if you discarded, I think silver was the only one where if you discarded it did something, because gold required your opponent to do something.
You had cards like Brow, which was just like if it's discarded, draw a card. Like,
it was okay,
simple value.
But like there wasn't enough there for it, right? So like it needed something to like push it forward to actually be like a strategy that could play, right? And that's what Grapha did. And Grapha is an insanely good boss monster for a structure deck and for Dark World itself. So
what did Grapha do?
The Grapha, if you discard it, it pops a card. And then if it is in your grave, you can bring it back. So you can bounce a Dark World card or any other card on your side of the field, I believe, to your hand, and it special summons out.
So it's just like and that's not once per turn, right?
No, and that is why it became an FTK later on down the track. We saw with Fireball Dragon back in 2019.
So I was watching replays of this deck, and that's what I saw is like the really strong part was the not once per turn on Grapha, meaning it could be used for like did you use like deck devastation virus, things like that?
I did, I believe, but I played like this weird, so this is me saying that I didn't come in and straight play that deck. So like that deck had been out for a few years after I came back, but it is the one that like I used a lot of cards from it in the Dark World Burn and Abyss deck that I came back with. So I did use some of the deck devastation virus, but it was more in the side deck. What I was doing was I was using like the tour guide play. So like I would, get my tour guide, get a Scarm, and then search like a Dark World card in the end phase or something along those lines. That was how I was using the deck. Yeah, because they're fiends,
aren't they? Oh my
goodness! It had slight synergy. Yeah. So like when Burn and Abyss first came out, it didn't quite have enough, right? It had like its like standard play, but it didn't really go on to do much else until like kind of the second and third wave. So you kind of had to use it as a supplementary engine with another kind of thing. And I chose the Dark World engine, and it was cool. Like, and that's what I liked about this like structure deck, because it gave fiends and discarding like really good effects and like good cards to like go into other strategies.
Yeah. What's funny is going over these first two decks that had a lot of meta success, and I think we're gonna like see this a lot, is unlike earlier structure decks, they really focus in on like a typing. Obviously the first structure decks ever, Dragon's Roar, Fury from the Deep, were type focused. But like Agents is a fairy deck. Gates is a fiend deck, and I think that lends itself well to a structure deck because there are a lot of really broken cards in every typing, and a lot of the time you can't abuse them, right? Like Christia, you said, for the Agent deck, is a broken card that was like impossible to summon. The Agents made it very easy, and same with Dark Worlds. I guess Scarm wasn't necessarily a bad card by any means, but it's certainly more versatile than just a Burning Abyss card, and this deck really exemplified that.
Yeah, and I think one other thing I'll add to it is like you're still seeing Dark World like being played today. Like obviously it's not in our like top end of the meta, but like you can see it in like some rogue strategies. You've seen it in like Dark World, Dark World losing the what was Danger Dark World. Sorry, that's what I'm going for. Yeah, so like that's the deck we currently see, and that's kind of cool. Like, and I do like the fact that like it still synergizes with modern things, and you might see it again later on. Like if there's another discarding style of like Dark Fiends, you'll see it come back again.
Well, I mean, we might see it sooner than we think, because if we're following, as you discussed in the Agents one, the structure deck rewaves, Gates of the Underworld is next on the list.
Yeah. Can we say what those are?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I can do a little quick comprehension. So, the Japan introduced this. They're called SDR. So, Structure Deck Rewave. Or Structure Deck R.
Do we know what the R stands for?
I think Rewave, Revamped, Reinvented.
I think it's just R.
Yeah, it's like it's
just R.
Yeah, so it's literally just Structure Deck R. So this is a series of structure decks that they have taken pre-existing decks from the past and essentially breathed new life into them. And we are going to cover a couple further on down the list, but the newest one in the OCG is the Agents one. So they have basically reinvigorated an agent strategy, providing really incredible fairy strategies to the metagame and are seeing success. So if we're going to be following that metric, Gates of the Underworld is the next structure deck R in the OCG.
Next one sequentially?
Yeah, it's the next one sequentially, yes. Yeah.
Because it's interesting that, we've looked at this list of meta structure decks. A lot of the meta structure decks are rewaves. They're structure deck Rs. And Agents is the first deck that won Worlds and was good to receive a structure deck R. So we're in like new territory with those. Like there was nothing bad about the Agent structure deck. So there was nothing to fix compared to some of the later ones that were just like not good decks that got turned into good decks.
And I think that's the thing with rewaves as well, is like if and it's similar to our discussion we've had before with archetypes. Like if an archetype receives support that is good, and the archetype was already like had a good base and was good already, like it's going to be better, right? And we've always seen that with the rewaves in the past. Like as soon as the structure deck comes out, and I am jumping a little bit forward here, but like with the Monarch one, there was an original structure deck with Caius, and yeah, sure, that was really good at the time, but the rewave was just so much better because they had to just amp it up. And I'm excited to see.
Wasn't playable.
No, it was just Caius. Like you took Caius out, and then yeah. But yeah, like it's really cool, and I hope we see like an Gates of Underworld rewave that will like push them forward again, because I think that like Dark World is such a cool strategy. Like personally, I know that a lot of people don't like it, but I like to see it come back.
It's funny. It's because of the FTKs.
FTKs leave bad taste in people's mouths, but like nothing is funnier than just like someone activating Dark World dealings and going, "Oh, discard Grapha." Like you know, that you haven't lost any advantage in that. So I think that's funny. Moving on, typing that needs no support in the slightest.
Yeah, but not looking forward to this rewave.
Don't need this one rewaved at all, Konami. You can skip right over this one. Is Dragons Collide. Now this is a deck that I believe coined the term Chaos Dragons. Like this was the concept. Is that's correct?
Yeah, I mean there was Chaos as a deck, and there was Dragons as a deck. Like those were both good decks, and this was the first deck that I think introduced. I mean, Chaos Emperor Dragon exists, which I guess is what this is like meant to reference, but there wasn't any other like Dragon Chaos typing predominantly in the game, not before this anyway. And it's also interesting to note this was the deck right after Gates of the Underworld, so they did release just 3 bangers in a row. Can't relate these days. But Joe, you were around for this one too. Do you remember much about Chaos Dragons in their early years?
In all honesty, I'll be like, I don't remember a lot of it. I just remember the Eclipse Wyvern being abused from the start, and it carried on like that way. Like there was like a little bit of like I saw the like kind of the beginnings of it with Lightsworn and stuff, but I didn't see much further than that because it was towards the end of my first time I stopped playing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Lightsworn's what a better way to put lights and darks in grave than just maintenance costs. So yeah, Chaos Dragons, it was a really interesting mechanic. Eclipse Wyvern is really the star of this deck.
Do you want to read Eclipse Wyvern for the gang at home?
Yeah, I believe we can understand, what Eclipse Wyvern does. So Eclipse Wyvern is a dragon it's a level 4 light dragon. Wow, really making it so hard to find and get to the grave, huh? So it simply reads, if this card is sent to grave, banish one level 7 or higher light or dark dragon from your deck. If this card in the grave is banished, you can add the monster banished by this effect to your hand. So some notable
level 7s.
Omissions. There's some notable omissions on this card text. The once per turn is obviously the first one. And the second one is it is a if, so it will never miss timing. This was, if we look at the deck list really quickly, it included things like, I believe, was it Dark Arm Dragon, Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was not hard to figure out what you wanted this deck to do. And Eclipse Wyvern carried on being a good card.
Well, we can talk about the 2013 instance to kind of highlight how the card was broken. So you mentioned Light Swans. That is how the deck was played, having done some research into it. The idea was that you would mill Eclipse Wyvern with the Light Swans, or with cards like Foolish Burial, you could send it to grave because it just triggered no matter what. And then with that Eclipse Wyvern, either banish Dark Armed Dragon or Judgment Dragon. High level dragon, by the way. And it was basically the only way Light Swans ever had to just search Judgment Dragon, their boss monster. So it ended up being like a very core part of pure Light Swans. But the introduction of Light Pulsar and Dark Flare Dragon in the dragon typing, being chaos monsters, you can summon them by banishing a light and a dark. Not to mention Blackluster Soldier was still legal, meant you could basically just play this deck that all of a sudden could put out like 10,000 damage out of nowhere. Super oppressive deck and super reliant on these like very powerful structure deck cards. So definitely one of the strongest, structure deck individual card printings ever. Eclipse Wyvern is banned now.
And I think
still.
One other thing I'll say about Eclipse Wyvern is it was also abused back in Shaddoll formats too. Like with sending it off Shaddoll Fusions, you would banish that.
It's a light.
Yeah, like I think I did it. I think I did it once. Even on stream for the multi format, I sent Eclipse Wyvern, and you guys were like, "Oh yeah, Eclipse Wyvern. What does that send?"
Just kind of
out. Dark Arm Dragon. Okay, and then how do you banish? And then you had it was insane, and
good.
And there's a reason that card will probably never come back because of it. Nah, it's just too good. I don't want to see
Ruben,
that come back.
Do you want to tell us about the deck that came out, 3 years after the structure deck that still abused that card?
Yeah, well, that was Dark Matter. That was Galaxy Ice Dark Matter Dragon. That simply, I believe its effect was send 3 dragons from deck to grave.
Yeah.
You send, or your opponent sends 3 monsters from deck to grave. They could all have the same name. They didn't, so you just went, oh, crazy. I guess I'm just going to send 3 Eclipse Wyverns to grave. And I'll banish 3 cards from my deck. So you've effectively already deck thinned by 6. And then it was also not the hardest thing in the world to just, I think you had Dragon Rulers were around, or were they gone by this time? I can't remember.
You had Dragon Rulers.
So you had Dragon Rulers, and you just went, I guess I'll just banish 2 dragons to summon a Dragon Ruler. Oh, cool. 2 Eclipse Wyverns trigger. Guess I'll add both the cards I banished off of those Eclipse Wyverns back.
I'm not sure if Dark Matter had... I might be wrong here, but I don't remember Dragon Rulers being out back when it came out. I think it might have been just after.
I'm looking at the list right now of Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Rulers. They were all at 1.
Yeah.
Oh, they were all at 1. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No babies.
Yeah, they were.
We had 1 law.
Yeah, that's right. So it was after. The reason I'm saying that is it was after the Dragon Ruler format as such.
Yeah. This deck is great. They had Future Fusion.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Because it was, I believe,
Pre-errata as well.
Pre-errata.
Yeah.
God, that's such a silly. This deck is like a goat deck featuring Dragon Rulers. What the hell? So yeah, basically this deck kind of marks one of the first
oopsies.
Yeah, whoopsie structure decks where a card from it has been banned and has stayed banned. So it'll be interesting if they rewave this one next. Do they
Please don't.
Do they print a better Eclipse Wyvern? What do you do? The deck can be
really
broken now.
Skip over that. You could skip over Dragon's Collide. I am very fine.
Which they've done with the rewaves. There's definitely some notable snubs or decks that just never really got the same love. Speaking of decks that got a ton of love, though, the next one on our list is Saga of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. which I didn't even know was a structure deck.
Oh, yeah. It was cool.
This is a pretty impressive structure deck.
Well, it wasn't at the time.
No,
Well, thinking about it, like it gave Blue Eyes
something.
other than vanilla beats, basically. Like
That's true.
the deck was still vanilla beats, but my goodness, it was pretty intimidating when your opponent went normal summon Maiden pass. Because you go, well, I can't attack it because you just get a Blue Eyes, and if I try to book it or take control of it, you negate it and then get a Blue Eyes. So you just got Blue Eyes no matter what happened.
But I mean, this deck also had like Rabid Dragon in it. Like it certainly wasn't meta, right, Joe? It wasn't.
Yeah, it was. It never really did anything when it first came out. But what it did do is it gave like those people that had like, you know, the nostalgic trip of Blue Eyes something to use that was okay. And like that was cool in my eyes. Like I think it fulfilled what the structure deck intended, which is a playable Blue Eyes deck. I don't think it was, you know, it never pushed into the meta, and like that's okay because like 3 years later we obviously saw it go on to win Worlds, and they used some of those cards that were printed back in that structure deck, like in the build. Like As Your Eyes would probably be the one that was most notable. Yeah. But
As Your Eyes was crazy.
Yeah, but it was cool because it at least printed like some really key cards for that strategy. Like it had Trade-ins, it had like Dragon Shrine, it had White Stone of Legend, obviously not as good as the new Stone, but it had these cool cards, and I think it definitely fulfilled what it intended to do, and I liked it for that because you guys know that like my first deck playing Yu-Gi-Oh was Blue Eyes Beatdown, and I've always had a soft spot for Blue Eyes, so yeah, I think it was a really cool deck.
I think this showcases a really impressive like feat from Konami because they had a structure deck that was already existent, and like we said, for like 3 years. Then we saw the support coming out in Shining Victories, and everyone went, okay, here's a strategy. You've got a way to play it. You have Sage, you have Spirit Dragon, you already had access to some, like you said, really incredible spells like Trade-in, like Cards of Consonance, like Dragon Shrine. So like they had kind of already like 50% built you the deck, and Shining Victories was like, here's the other 50% to really bump it up.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. And I think we'll obviously see Blue Eyes is one of those weird decks where you're going to see like a trickle of support forever because it is the most iconic card in Yu-Gi-Oh! In my opinion. Like when you think, well, what that and Dark Magician, I would say the two, like you talk to any random stranger on the street, they'll be like, Blue Eyes, Dark Magician, Exodia. They're the ones.
Yeah.
So like
episode 1.
Yeah, and that's the thing that all non kind of people that play Yu-Gi-Oh say to me when I talk about Yu-Gi-Oh is, do you play Blue Eyes? You know, so yeah, I think it's definitely a cool thing. I hope that one may get a rewave. I'm not 100% sure. Like it, but I could see it because
getting all the support in Battles of Chaos as well.
Yeah, it would be nice to see a rewave that just included all of the new support over the years, because like some of it's expensive, like Twin Burst Dragon, Bingo Machine Go is still expensive, like a deck that just combines all that stuff. So notably, this is the second structure deck. Well, I guess I should say not like purely the structure deck, but it is the second structure deck that won Worlds. And it was largely on the back of Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon being able to tag into Azure Eyes Silver Dragon.
Yeah, alternative. That's a good example.
Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon, which came out in the movie pack, or like the special edition Dark Side of Dimensions. It definitely took a smattering of support, but this structure deck laid the foundation because it did have a bunch of really playable cards in it, and Azure Eyes is just a house. Like the protection until the end of the next turn was a huge reason that the deck was hard to beat.
And not to mention that Spirit Dragon had an incredible floodgate because it prevented 2 or more monsters being summoned at the same time, which, if we remember, Shining Victories was just like peak Magic Spectre format.
And it negates graveyard effects too. It's just a house. Like this deck became such a powerful force.
Stops Revolt as well right now.
Yeah, but yes. Exactly. So like you think about it, like Spirit Dragon still has really impactful like implications to this day. Like and not to mention it's a synchro monster that you could use the negate and then tag out into Azure Eyes, and then monsters are indestructible. Like so powerful. I understand why it won Worlds because like Spirit Dragon's floodgate effect combined with, let's not forget, Blue Eyes' 3,000 attack points. It wasn't hard to just like kill your opponent on the crackback at all.
Still playing vanilla beats.
Yeah, vanilla beats, but with a bit of spice.
I actually really enjoyed that format as well, where like Blue Eyes kind of just like was good because there was nothing else. Like it was a really weird format, but like I really enjoyed it at the time, and yeah, I hope to see it again soon. But moving on to the next structure deck, one that Lucas will definitely be able to talk about.
One that I've potentially had some experience with. I don't know about you guys, but so the next structure deck to come out, and the one that I am dying to see a rewave on. Not that I need more hero support, but I'll always take it. Is Hero Strike, and this is like a huge deal structure deck for me, and also I think for the format in general, because while a lot of the other structure decks were good and definitely saw play in archetypes, I think this is one of the first structure decks that ever really introduced its own, admittedly quite a small engine, but still a very powerful deck just on its own, which was Masked Hero. Like Masked Hero was just like a house when it came out, and it was almost entirely due to the power of 2 cards in the set. It was Shadow Mist and Masked Hero Darklaw, which to this day is, I think, still like, if not the most powerful Yu-Gi-Oh card ever printed. It's up in the top 5.
Legal, like not banned ones, absolutely. I would. I
mean, what else? Like, is there a card you'd rather face down? Or a card that like you'd be more afraid to see summoned on your opponent's side of the field? Really?
Like Shockmaster or Rongo, like
but
again, like
it's up there with those two.
It is absolutely, and I think what made Darklaw so impactful was its Floodgate effect. We just spoke about how Blue Eye Spirit Dragon was super powerful. Darklaw's Floodgate effect is unparalleled, I would go to say.
And what Hero Strike really introduced was like a discrete engine. You could use a Hero Libs to special summon the new card Shadow Mist from the deck. And then Shadow Mist's effect would just add a change spell card from deck to hand. So you could basically, with the one card, a Hero Lives, summon a Darklaw, and then play any other deck. And we saw that with immediately, like this was during Pendulum format 2015?
It was around at the time, but I remember BA used it a little bit with Mask Change 2.
Okay.
Like that's how I remember Darklaw. The one thing I have to mention is like when this deck was printed, it was kind of in a weird place because like pure heroes just didn't have enough, and then like Mask Change 2 was so much of a big cost for like your one Darklaw. So like it printed such an impactful card, but I don't feel like at the time. I mean, yeah, it was good and it topped, but like it's almost seen more success later on. Like,
Stratos was banned. Interestingly,
yeah, exactly.
That was one. Like the deck doesn't have Elemental Hero Stratos in it because it was banned at the time for being too generically powerful.
Yeah.
So I guess that hurt it a little bit.
It definitely did, and like obviously because Pepe was around at the time as well, I believe.
This was the only
to get in with that deck, if that makes sense, because like
this was considered the only deck that could go up against Pepe, I believe, at the time.
Yeah.
And it was still not close. Like Pepe had like a 70-30 win rate. But this was like, if you didn't want to play Pepe, and for reference, Pepe was like a near $1,000 deck, you could play this. And like, if you summon a Darklaw, they'd be like, well, that does suck. My Pendulum monsters get banished. Uh-oh.
Yeah. I think Hero's still really strong. Darklaw has never been power crept.
Never.
I don't even think by
it can't
any
be
other
either,
boss
hopefully.
monster that I agree. I don't think it can be. Macrocosmos is limited for a reason, and Darklaw is very conditional to summon. And I mean, Mask Change had been around since the beginning of Generation Force, so like we saw Mask Change existing in the world. There was just no payoff. Like there wasn't anything that you were like, oh, I guess I could like tag into, what was it, like Koga or like Divine Wind? Oh no, those are also structured cards. Vapor was like the
Koga.
Acid
Goka,
as well.
Goka.
Yeah, don't forget all these.
Acid was a premium collection one. That's an interesting one. Yeah, that was a bit later. But yeah, you're right. Like Mask Change, when it came out in Generation Force, was like, okay, Vapor and Goka. Okay. And then this gave the deck like legs. And I mean, we still see Modern Hero use this engine to this day because, Shadow Mist has also an incredible second effect that if it's sent to grave, it searches a hero card, which is amazing. And it also, I would say, it like almost kind of coined the term like a Shadow Mist clause. Like you can only use one effect per turn and only once. Like BA's had a similar vibe of like you can only use one effect on the card per turn and only once that turn. The restriction of like, okay, I either get the Mask Change or I get the Hero Search. I don't get both. And I'd be interested to see like if when we get down the line to this as a rewave, what would it include? Like, how would you what's the vamp up? I'm not sure, but I think heroes are strong. Heroes are strong. They continue to be strong.
It is interesting if we get a rewave because the boss monster of this deck has seen 0 competitive success whatsoever, unlike a lot of the other competitive meta decks that we've seen on these structure decks.
Yeah, Contrast Hero Chaos is a hot red, but it's so hard to summon.
It's so bad. And I guess the rewave would be interesting to see if like they move away from Darklaw Turbo and like make Masked Hero a playable deck on its own.
Yeah. Potentially,
options.
I don't think you can make a better. We're like completely right. Like you can't make a better Darklaw. Like even if Darklaw only had the one effect of being a Macrocosmos, I still feel like it would be played. Like it's that good.
It's warping, and I mean, you said you saw it in BA. It saw splashing into Thunder Dragon. It saw splashing into Orcust. Like this is a structure deck from 2016 that. One card in it still saw competitive success to this day.
Yeah.
So it's the the legacy is so strong.
And it was one of the structure decks at the time that like everyone bought free of it. Like it was like you got the structure decks where like they come out and like some people buy them for the key card that you want out of it. But this is one of the ones where like everyone was just like, I'm gonna build like a Darklaw deck because why not? It's like cheap as so like and that's exactly, and that's it. It was good in that sense where it gave an affordable in for players.
Yeah, and then we even see a bit more progression, like before heroes became what we know them today. Like we saw them being used in totally heroes because, Bubble Man was still a really nice card that you could use. Hero Lives giving you like, a Darklaw and a Totally Awesome at the time was really impactful. An Omni Negate to protect your Darklaw and the macro effect. Basically, just if your opponent couldn't break that, you won. And that's great. That's so nice. Not to mention that it's only your opponent, so it's not a true macro effect.
Yeah,
you all your stuff still goes to grave. Theirs all gets banished. So you know what? Thanks, Darklaw.
So yeah, and it is definitely up there with one of the best structure decks. But moving on to the next structure deck, this one here I would say is the best structure deck of all time.
This is your pick for best. I think I'd have a different opinion, but
I'd
like to hear your take on
it. It's very close between the two. Like, and I know exactly the two that we're both thinking.
Yeah, I know.
So this one,
third one.
Okay, for this one here, for out of the box playability, we've added one card is the best structure deck, and that's Emperor of Darkness. So like, this is you buy 3 of them, you add in a Kuraz, you can win a regional. Like,
and this was the first rewave structure deck.
This was SR01.
Yep. And I don't think there's been other decks, and we'll talk about them later, where you can buy them, add in a few cards, and you'll be at the same level. But this is the only one that I can think of that you can literally just add 1 or 2 cards, and you're done. Like you obviously need to make a side up and stuff like that, but like everything was compact. It was in the deck. Like you had everything you needed there, and you didn't have to buy staples because you already had everything you needed. Like it was the whole engine was there. And I don't think we've seen that again since.
I agree. I think like the only things you would add to this deck out of the box was like a Vanities and a Majesty's Fiend. That's it.
Yeah.
And a Kuraz, obviously, because that was a notable omission because it was printed in a set as the set was released. They didn't want to double dip on availability. I believe I did my research. It was released in a battle pack at the same time as Emperor of Darkness. So they went, we're not going to be able to sell this battle pack. Oh, look, here's a structure deck that needs this card. Everyone needs the battle pack now. So
yes, you could really end that sentence with, we're not going to be able to sell battle pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrible set.
The thing that made this deck so good was, I'm going to say 3 cards in it. So we had Ether being obviously the payoff. Pantheism being like the thing that made Monarchs more consistent, even though it still had bricking issues. And I'm going to say the other one would be, it's kind of 2 cards, is Ida and Eidos. And like those 2 cards allowed Monarchs to like kind of just have a starter. And that's what they always missed. Like back when they were in the early days, you had to set up with a Treeborn Frog, for example, and like get your Monarchs going. This just gave you a normal summonable starter that like let you just play the game. And with those 3 cards that came out, and like there were other toolbox cards in there with like I'm missing the big one as well. Sorry, Domain, obviously, shutting down the extra deck. But like there were so many toolbox cards within the deck, like that just let you search for these other cards. So you would be like, You could activate Tenacity, search your Pantheism, discard the Trap, and that gives you another way of using Tribute Summon. So, like, yeah, it just had everything you needed, and it was so cool. Like, because budget players could play in a format, like, up the top.
This is like the definition of budget success. And I think, like, Monarchs, I mean, they evolved from this like incredible domain lock to what we saw was the extra deck Monarchs, which was a whole other problem. Because Monarchs, the whole balancing act of Monarchs is that you needed the normal summons. And yes, Eidos gave you the additional one, but you generally had to normal summon it to gain it. So the free being able to get your Seraphonite and getting 2 normal summons was just ridiculous.
Not to mention the restriction was supposed to be you didn't have an extra deck.
Yeah, the whole point of that was you didn't get to utilize an extra deck, and then here you go activating Brilliant Fusion. And then it evolved even further to Monarch FTK, where you saw just the use of Pantheism, Ether, every single spell card that you could find that you needed to draw cards, and you were just Life Equalizer Magical Explosion, because, like, what else? Like, Cards from the Sky was an incredible card, but there was no good search for it.
Well, this was some symbolic of a problem of a lot of structure deck cards of not being once per turn
at all.
And Pantheism can search Pantheism. Fun fact. So people quite quickly clocked on that Pantheism was the problem card, which is why it was banned or limited for so long to stop people from doing that, searching Pantheism off Pantheism, drawing through their entire deck, and then killing their opponent. But the intentions were good.
I have a really good memory of extra deck Monarchs, and the card that like really broke them was Gofu. Like that card there,
oh my god,
Gofu. Yeah, that card there, like just single-handedly made that deck super playable. And my memory of it was I was playing Cosmo at the time. I went to OC, and like the only deck that I lost to was Monarch because of Stormforth and Gofu and like extra deck. Like it was insane. Like you just couldn't like. You made the Gofu. You tributed it off. You for the Eidos. No, sorry, wrong. The big dude.
Erebus?
Yeah, and then with the you use like the tokens or like you use the tokens tribute, and then you summon your Kuraz and you overlay, I believe, into rank 5. Like,
you can pop the tokens with Kuraz to draw cards.
Yeah, draw cards as well. So like Gofu used to like just help you plus. It was insane. Like if you ever get the chance, look into this list, into those lists and how they played. But like talk about like a structure deck that like changed from being it used to be a floodgate structure deck that prevented extra deck plays, and then it evolved into a deck that really used the extra deck to abuse everything and that's why we saw Gofu go. I think in the end, like,
I mean, there's
lots of reasons for Gofu to go, but that was one of them. Like, and if you guys ever get the chance, like, build that deck and have a go. It was good fun
as hell. Reminds me of Metal Foes. With Gofu would do the same thing, like use the tokens to pop to set Metal Foes cards.
And one thing seems a bit more balanced. Yeah,
it's still pretty gross. One thing I did want to bring up, I guess, not to harp on this structure deck forever, but the availability of it. And we talked about this a little bit with Heroes in the Pepe $1,000 deck format, but definitely this to me rings true as like, I don't think so many people would have played this if it weren't as budget as it was. I mean, Ruben, like we talked about this, yesterday, but did this lead to it being more represented?
I think so, because
100%.
You just literally went to your LGS. I mean, I'll take 3. Know anyone selling Majesties, Vanities, and Kuraz? That's all you would do.
Yeah,
and I think it's almost like a testament to Konami's deck building. I think like this is in my eyes one of the two, like this is like a crown jewel of Konami's success with structure decks. Like it was so good they had to deal with it. So I think that it's just it absolutely, because it was more available, it was represented more because it was no work to find it.
The only thing,
and I think that led to people labbing it, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Would we have gotten extra deck Monarchs if these were chase secrets that cost $1,000? I don't know if we would have. Like, I feel like the creativity came from everyone had it and everyone went, what else can we do with it?
Yeah, and I think it became like that because the original deck of Domain Monarchs, and you'll find that now if you ever get the chance to play it, is it really does brick. It has massive
yes,
brick
it
issues.
does.
Like that is it was kind of one of those decks that only ever lost to itself. Like if you didn't brick, you just won the game. Like it's one of those sorts of decks, and that's why. But then because like if you go into a regional back in New Zealand at the time, like you'd walk in and it would be like 50% of people would be playing Monarchs because they're just so cheap and affordable. And like imagine if you were a budget player and you don't have access to the funds, and this deck came along. It is literally just like a $40 in to be playing a tier 1 deck.
Yeah, you think about like, you know, you're a player who's interested in the game. You don't have that much expendable income. You look around and see Pepe, which is $150 a Pendulum Sorcerer, the hundreds of dollars in the extra deck, and then someone goes, "This is like $100 total."
You don't
to
even
build
need
the
an
deck.
extra deck.
You don't even need, you can even play the game with 15 less cards and have a chance.
Yeah,
amazing. And I think that's why like Heroes and Monarchs have such a soft spot for people's hearts. Is like they did kind of come out at a time where if you were just getting into the game, you didn't have to feel left out. They were your friends that looked after you.
Yeah, the cards were so good they got put on the limited list and only got taken.
And then they got banned because they were affordable. Don't talk about that.
And they only came off in 2020. So 2020 was Ether and Pantheism coming to one. I believe also, this is a very side note, how many people who have been enjoying it. This was Lithium's personal plea to Konami.
Every year.
Every single ban list, he would go, "Please take Pantheism off the list." And it never happened. And I remember the list that came off, and he was ecstatic.
A sweet little chestnut.
Sweet little Lithium.
But
Lithium's
moving
where
on
I
to
got all these freaking decks from as well. So shout outs to Lithium for doing the work there.
I'll let Lucas talk about this next deck because obviously it's one that's definitely you're interested in for sure. And
going from a deck that didn't use its extra deck at all to a deck that uses every single one.
But a deck you could buy 3 of and have most of a deck. Pendulum Domination. I wanted to bring this one up because it is not a top tier deck. It never was here. But this kind of like leads into a discussion about how we receive product from the OCG. And we can talk a little bit as well about some of the newer structure deck R's and how that has kind of messed with us too. But Pendulum Domination was the DDD product. Like when it came out in the OCG in Japan, it was everywhere. Like DDD became the best deck. It was really up there with like, I think you could play Zodiac or you could play DDD. Like those were the 2 good decks and they were like really good balancing acts with each other. And DDD being like an anime deck, a fan favorite, it played every summoning mechanic, so swag, like the combos are non-linear. Everyone was really excited to get it, and then it never came out. Or it did come out, but it took like 9 months or something, way past its relevancy date, and it came out 2 weeks before Master Rule 4, which just completely hosed the deck. I mean, if you've ever played the deck, imagining having to do it with link arrows is just like mind-blowing. I have no idea how you would do it. So there's not a lot to talk about in terms of like its impact on the TCG, but more so on how when it comes to structure decks, we get them late often, and we also sometimes just don't get them. And how that impacts, you know, in one way, Monarchs was overrepresented because of it being an available structure deck. And on the other hand, DDDs being relegated to a product that got delayed when they could have been in a core set alongside their other low rarity friends. Really hurt the deck. It's like the flip side.
Well, I mean, we've seen this still ring true. The revamped Warriors Triumph structure deck was put into Toon Chaos. All the pieces of Immortal Phoenix, Gearfried, and Renowned.
Super inaccessible.
We saw the Dragunity structure deck being relegated to Ghost from the Past. And based on the release schedule, it looks like we're not receiving the Lost Sanctuary Rewave in a structure deck format. It'll be more likely in a March reprint. So we are unfortunately at the mercy of how Konami dictates when these products are released. And this is unfortunately like a bit of a black spot for them, because this was a deck that had so much potential when it was released and the time frame that it would have arrived into the TCG, but because of it being so late, it was just overshadowed by the fact that you had True Draco and Zodiac or Shakanine, a fusion substitute Zodiac were rampant. And you were on the cusp of a Master Rule update, which just nullified the deck strategies.
I mean, this deck stood up to Zodiac. Like, it actually topped in the OCG in peak Zoo format. That's how good this deck is.
I definitely remember the hype behind it. Like, and to be honest, I didn't even realize this one even came out. Like, let's put it that way. Like, I quit when Master Rule 4 came out, so like I took a bit of a break. But I remember like back in like before Zoo came out, seeing this DDD deck, and like, I remember for sure like Peter Bird was telling me about this DDD deck, and like he really liked the concept of it, and it just like didn't happen, and it's so like it sucks to see stuff like that happen. Like I don't like it, and I hope in the future like we get these structures a little bit faster than what we are at the moment.
Well, the issue is Konami sees dollar signs when
they do.
A structure deck is meta successful in the OCG. It's so hard for them to resist breaking it up into a set. Obviously, this was a different case. You know, they were just delayed. Maybe the printing was an issue, or the translations took longer than normal, etc. But the Warriors Triumph Rewave, the Infernoble one, which would have been awesome to talk about on a list of meta structure decks. You know, it was like a $700 deck. Like the Toon Chaos short print didn't help, but they were printed as ultra rares with a bunch of high rarity cards in like Rise of the Duelist. It was a very unfortunate time to be buying Yu-Gi-Oh, but certainly didn't help. You know, that this deck that could have been an affordable meta contender was turned into, you know, your standard $500 to $1,000 meta deck.
Yeah. But moving on to the next structure deck, that kind of changes it completely. Like, there is another good one.
We keep doing some good yo-yos here.
Whiplash.
Yeah, it's a bit of a yo-yo. It definitely is. Like, and you're seeing that. Like, it started, and the first 3 structure decks we talked about were all in a row, and they were all good. And what we're seeing as time goes on is way more bad ones compared to good ones. But when a good one does come along,
X in this situation we keep coming back to with like this one was good, this one was bad.
But this one
was good. This one was great. Ruben, tell us about this one.
Well, 2 words. Dino DNA. This is the Dino Smashers Fury structure deck. So this was SR04. So this was the 4th rewaved structure deck from the structure deck R from Japan. This is wow. I mean, this is what a structure deck this was. So this was released in 2017. So this again, very similar time to thinking of like Pendulum Domination. But this was, wow. I am constantly amazed at how impactful this deck is. So this was a rewave of, I believe it was the, what one was it?
It was like the original dinosaur deck.
There's one, Dinosaur's Rage. So it was a rewave of that one. So this introduced 4 or 5 cards into
4 that mattered.
4 that mattered, 5 total. The first of which is a card that has been the bane of many existence today, is Soul Eating Oviraptor. This is a dinosaur that basically made you play 6 copies of Fossil Dig, a already incredible search spell for the typing. But not only did it facilitate you setting up your hand, it also could set up your grave. This was partnered really strongly with the field spell Lost World that generated tokens when dinosaurs were summoned. And it also provided an incredible floodgate effect where your opponent couldn't target monsters on the field except tokens with card effects. So it protected your dinosaurs. Not to mention that this also came out at a time where Miscellaneousaurus was a common from Raging Tempest. So this was, and it was included in the structure deck. So you already had your protection. Lost World provided you with the tokens. Oviraptor had a great destruction effect that you could substitute with. And then Petite Pteranodon was a really increased baby Cerosaurus that gave you 4 or highers as opposed to 4 or lowers. And then the boss monster. I think this is probably one of the best boss monsters of recent printing, and that is Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. This, to me, I think we even talked about in our boss monsters discussion, is like the pinnacle of a boss monster. This is, to me, how you do a boss monster right. Would you agree?
Boss monster as well.
Yeah, this is the best boss monster of all time. Like, Masterpiece is good. This thing beats over Masterpiece, so I think that means it's better. And it's easier to summon. But this, Joe, maybe this would come unexpected. This is my pick for the best structure deck ever printed.
Okay.
Easily. No. And the reason for that, and I've written them down, this deck is not only has it been good for 4 years, it is literally still tier 2. Like, it is still a good-ass deck. And it's evolved, but the core of it has never changed from these incredible cards that, for the most part, stayed off the ban list the entire time. I have here, this was initially in True King Dino with Yang Zings.
Yeah.
As like a very discrete engine to find, a boss monster, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, and, Baby Ceresaurus, popping cards with Lithosagium, into summoning Oviraptor. Like, it was just an incredible value engine.
Yeah, which one Worlds?
Which one Worlds?
True King Dino Yang Zing,
the club.
one Worlds.
Then we just got pure dinosaur OTK or like Survival's End dinosaurs. And then we had combo dinosaur with Auroradon in 2020, being able to go head to head with like Synchro Eldritch at the time. And then we got scrap dinos and like the current build, like in this year. I still think that deck is tiered. Like everyone stopped playing it because Miscellaneousaurus went to 1. It still kicks my ass. Like this deck is just insane. Yeah. What was it like when it came out, Joe? Were you around playing?
I was a bit. I have to be honest, I was more of a casual player at that time. I went to sort of the odd hobby league and stuff, but it was one that I picked up. I think at the time I was actually playing Satella Knights of all things.
Oh my god.
I know. But like it was insane. Like a boss that like just flipped the whole board down that you just couldn't do much about. And then went on just to like full on OTK you. You were like, that's scary. Like, and it's still scary today. Like when I see an Ultimate Conductor come down and I know I don't have anything to stop it, you sit there and just go, well, goodbye board. Like and there's not many other cards that do that in the game, like by themselves. And the fact that you can like nowadays search for a card that summons it makes it insane.
It's truly up there with Masterpiece of a card that like hits the table, you go, I've lost the game, like it's over. Like I can't out it. Unless I have this exact sequence of like 3 cards that out it.
One thing I will say that kind of counters this being like the best structure deck of all time is like I mean in like more out of the box, I still think Monarch's the better. Like I agree with you 100% for like meta relevance over the longest period of time. This one is 100% the one. So like one that like has been around for 4 years, like and the cards from it, you're right, the core engine of it being still around. That does make this one the best. But for the out of the box playability, I remember it being in the meta back then, but it wasn't exactly like top tier just because it had some issues.
Well, you had availabilities, like cards like Dolka and Lagia shot up in price because everyone went, well, you need these, but they hadn't been printed since their collection tins or Photon Shockwave, and I think Duelist Saga may have just come out, so you had a printing of Lager available, but Dolka was the harder one to find, and Dolka was generally the better one because it was 2 monster negates instead of 1. Like, so yeah, there was a lot more to add to it, but I think the quality of the cards that you added to this deck was like unparalleled. Like every card you added to this deck, it provided it was synergistic, just made the strategy better. Dinosaurs as an engine are still the exact same cards that were released in the structure deck 4 years.
The only thing that they added really was Archosaur, and that's what propelled it forward.
Exactly.
Surge Double Evolution.
And that card pulled Dinosaurs forward because they went, well, Pill's the best card in the deck. We can't find it. You have to hard open it. Or you have to overtext to find it or something.
I remember when Archosaur was announced and everyone was just like, sorry? Like, Dinosaurs is topping. What is this? Like everyone was just freaking out.
More.
And,
more dinos.
And it 100% lived up to the hype. Like the whole, discard Miscellaneousaurus, banish itself, summon Archosaur, like was everywhere when that card came out. And it never stopped being oppressive.
No.
And this deck basically just gave you 9 copies of Miscellaneousaurus in your opening hand, which I think is what really pushed it to the meta contention. Not to mention it got a reprint in 2020, an unlimited print, which just extra helped push it over the edge in terms of representation. I mean, you say you saw half of New Zealand playing Monarchs. I felt like I saw half of New Zealand playing Dinos for a while.
Yeah. It was big, like, and it is one of those decks that was affordable, like because it was like you didn't need that much. Like sure, Lagia and Dolka, but like you didn't need a lot to play it. And we'll talk about ones that are coming up as well. Like there's lots of structure decks like this where the ones that you would note down that like hit it out the park as such are structure decks where you literally just have to add a few cards with a couple of staples. Like if there's a structure deck where you pull like 2 or 3 cards out of, they're the flops. So that's the difference between a good and a bad one. Yeah. And like speaking of like sort of oppressive strategies, we'll kind of move on to the next structure deck, talking about zombies.
Yeah, so Zombie Horde, this was SR06, I believe. So this was, again, the Structure Deck Rewave. This was 2018. And this was a rewave of the, I believe it was the Zombie World Structure Deck.
Yep.
Yeah.
Named after its,
named after the field
card.
spell. So, this was a strategy that, because zombies had always been a thing. Everyone remembers zombies from early Yu-Gi-Oh! You speak to players who were around early Yu-Gi-Oh! Days, you remember Zombie Master,
Mizuki.
you remember Mizuki,
Yeah.
you remember Burial from a Different Dimension, you remember Card of Safe Return.
I still have PTSD
Not in
from
this
that.
deck, funnily.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing, is you remember zombies as like a strategy. And this gave zombies the boss monster of Doom King Baladrock, which was a negate. And this is kind of what the deck, like zombies never had access to a negate so easily. Baladrock is a really incredible boss monster that would bring itself back from the graveyard if there was a field spell in play while it was in grave. So not only yours, but also your opponent could have a
Any
field spell.
Yeah.
And if a zombie activated its effect if a zombie monster activates
zombie
its
monster,
effect, you can negate it or banish a monster on the field or grave. Like you can chain it to its effect. It's you can't activate both effects in the same chain, but the introduction of the zombie world made everything that was in grave a zombie, so Doom King could hit it. And then you had cards like Necro World Banshee, which activated Zombie World from deck by banishing itself from grave as a quick effect, which to this day, I believe only Skullmeister can hit that effect.
Yep. I mean, it's
nothing in the game hits activating from deck.
It's Metaverse on a body that you can send with any, generic zombie send to graveyard card, which turns out there's a lot.
Unizombie, literally send a zombie from deck to grave.
And critiques you had of the dinosaur deck being unplayable out of the box. Looking at the list of this card,
it was definitely playable out of the box. Yeah.
Well, the zombie one is like a step above that. I mean, I'm looking at the list. This had Shiranui Solitaire in it. It had Unizombie. It had all of the new cards, but it also just came with Mizuki, Gozuki, Foolish Burial. Like this deck really was like out of the box good.
Yeah, so you saw a lot of like zombies kind of again got like legs. I think that's kind of what we like to think about with these structure deck reways, is that like the typing got legs.
Yeah.
Like zombies, you go, okay, well the zombie strategy is now Baladrock because I can make a zombie that gives a negate. Zombie World is really impactful. Like it's still a really strong floodgate effect. Not to mention that this introduced Rivalry Zombie World because it meant you didn't have to just find Zombie World and activate your trap. You could Banshee activate it and then just set Rivalry.
Well, it also gave that deck legs because Zombie World Rivalry was illegal since Zombie World was printed back in forever ago. But if they outed the Rivalry, you lost the game.
Yeah.
Whereas with Baladrock, it's like, well, now out my Rivalry, I've got a negate.
Yeah.
And not to mention,
great card.
Not to mention now that like this is one of the structure decks that, similar to Dino, like years after its printing, is still seeing these cards used with competitive success with Eldritch now. Like it's one of those things where Zombie World is a really old card that will always be relevant because of how it affects everything. Like you can just turn off strategies with it, and combining that with like Eldritch, it gives even more protection, and it will always be around. I feel if types and stuff are around, which they will be. So, but yeah. It definitely
what a great one.
It's a shame this deck didn't get reprinted because the dinosaur one did. And I don't know why they didn't reprint the Zombie World one.
It needs it because I mean the price of the cards in there
Banshees are $20.
Nuts. Yeah.
Banshees are $20.
Are they
crazy.
really?
Yeah, Banshees are like $20 on TCG Collector. Speaking of structure decks that never got reprinted but had incredible success, it is the Soul Burner structure deck. Now this is like if we say that Monarch, like the Emperor of Darkness, was the crown jewel, I think this is the magnum opus. I think that this is absolutely the pinnacle of a structure deck that just knocked it out of the park. This was the definition of a self-contained engine, and very similar to the rise of the Dark Emperor. You only needed to add a couple of cards that were outside of the deck, and boy, did you really not need to, except for a single rare.
Yeah, so these were in a core set, but they just reprinted them in the structure deck. So you didn't even have to like buy any packs.
No.
Yeah. So the thing I would say, about Soulburner, is it was, and don't get me wrong, I'm going to get roasted for this. It was an insanely good structure deck. And don't get me wrong, you could buy 3 of them, you could add in a few cheaper hand traps and stuff, and you will have like a tier, I would say 1.5 deck. And the reason I say this is because you needed to spend money on Infinite Impermanences and Phantasme to really propel it forward to a tier 1 deck. And that's why I would say the Monarch one is still the best in my eyes, just because of that.
Yeah.
And because you had to spend... you had to spend another 300-400 to at least bring it forward to be the best it could be. And there is an argument as well to say that like you didn't need those cards, but playing that format, I feel like you needed Phantasme. Like it was.
Yeah. Well, this deck needed it. Like, because not every deck needed a bunch of generic hand traps. Like Monarch, for example, still doesn't really play any hand traps because it has its own ways of dealing with established boards. But you're right that like Salamangreat sucked at going second without hand traps.
Yes, absolutely. But that aside, it provided players with a strategy that was competitive out of the box, just like Dark Emperor, and printed a hand trap that was very expensive, being Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, at common, that the monster that you'll be purchasing, being Sunlight Wolf from Savage Strike, added back from grave.
So that's the thing with this deck is you could say that about most meta decks in history that are made up of like very discrete engines. And that's just a reality of the game. And the softening blow to that is once the deck is hit on the ban list, you can take those staples and play them in another deck.
Yeah, talk about taking staples. Like looking at this list, you see Ash Blossom, you see Dogorana Kaiju, you see Gozen Match, you see, I think Transmodify was a good one. Like, there's so many, incredible things. Red Resonator is still expensive to this day.
Is it?
Yes.
It is.
Why?
I don't
know. This card's actually kind of good.
Yeah, so it's just free summon. So like you saw all these really incredible cards, and then this is the deck that has actually won the most recent Worlds. That's correct.
It won the last 2.
No, it didn't win the last 2.
Did it not? I thought it won 2 in a row.
No.
I don't know.
No, because it won 2019, because 2018 was
Altergeist,
Trickstar and Altergeist. Yeah. No. Bowden lost that, unfortunately. Sorry, Bowden. Right. You came second place to Trickstar.
He comes second?
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yeah, he was
That's crazy.
Second, losing to Trickstar. But this was 2019. This won World Championships. And that's because everything was really insular, and the powerful cards like Gazelle, like Salamangreat Circle, like Balinx, these were all really accessible because they were in a structure deck, and Gazelle was just so powerful in its existence, coupled with Mirage Stalio. You like its effects to lock into fire effects. You didn't mind about it. It just that was your deck. It was fire effects, so it wasn't a lock in the slightest.
I guess where this deck succeeds over other structure decks is the zombie deck and the dinosaur deck very much rest heavily on how good generic zombie and dinosaur cards are. This deck didn't need any help. So when it comes to like a ban list, you literally had to hit the cards from the deck, or this deck was still playable. Like they had to ban Mirage Stalio, they had to limit Gazelle and Circle, because just like limiting some Cyburst cards wouldn't hurt at all. Like
no,
when this deck was at full power.
And I believe the first hit to the deck was Debug to 1. Everyone went, okay, cool. I guess I'll play Flame Buffalo.
Yeah, and that's why this deck won Worlds, is because nothing on it was on the ban list, and Worlds has a shared ban list, which is the same reason that like the Blue Eyes deck did so well. Is because like the OCG had more hits to Pendulum than we did at the time. Like sometimes these structure decks just sneak in on the fact that they're just so self-contained to take out like really major events.
One thing I have to note as well is I remember watching like the European Championships, and like it was so dominated by like Salamangreat. It was unreal. Like I think top 16 there was like, correct me if I'm wrong, someone, but like around about 60 to 70% of the top cut was Salamangreat. And like the final, I just remember being a Salad Mirror. And the reason that it was so good compared to the other Eternal Format decks at the time was consistency over long rounds in tournaments. Like it had that. Like other ones, like Orcus was sure the power level of Orcus and that was so much higher, but at the time, like it was just so damn consistent,
it did break, what it
It could brick, but like it was so good. Like like Soulburner, I'm talking like it had like it had 3 rotors in the deck, like, and other ways of getting into the cards. Like it's definitely such a good engine, and the reason that it saw that competitive success is how many hand traps you could run with it. Like the top list were running like 12 hand traps. Like
it hit everything.
Kind of a precedent for like new Yu-Gi-Oh.
Modern
Every
Yu-Gi-Oh,
deck is built like a Salamangreat deck.
Yeah.
20 engine, 20 interaction.
Yep.
That's like the perfect example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Salamangreat feels like a European deck. I don't know why. It just has that. Whenever I like think of it, I think of like Italians playing it.
Yeah, and I think that's because European players generally like more consistent decks, whereas like
That makes sense.
other regions for some reason like the higher power level decks. So
Like the high roll.
yeah, so it is a thing. Like you'll see, like at Euros, I believe it had the highest representation out of all of the other like World Championship qualifiers at the time. So
It's got a vibe, you know.
It does,
It's got Euro vibes.
Yeah, so does Burning Abyss always had that as well.
Yeah, well, BA never died, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Still going, yeah.
So moving on, so we have from one show protagonist or one show antagonist to another, we have the Rocket Revolt structure deck.
Was Soulburner a villain?
No, Soulburner was like a helper.
I never watched Reigns.
I also never watched Reigns.
Neither did I.
I believe Revolver was like the quote unquote villain, so that's fine.
Revolver was an antagonist, yes.
Yeah. So Rocket Revolt introduced rockets that we know and love today. So this was the inclusion of things like Rocket Tracer, Rocket Recharger, Silver Rocket, Absa Router. I would say that this deck was successful because of the cards it introduced, not the strategy the deck introduced.
Pure Rockets is not a great deck.
Yeah, Pure Rockets is cute. Dragon Link is better.
If someone summons a Rocket Tracer, I have lost the game. That's what this deck introduced.
Yeah.
Yeah, this taught players a lot about timing because you could activate quick launches and then chain your tracer to pop the quick launch.
That horrible interaction.
So you was just like you were 2-for-1ing in terms of activations. Like there was so much boot sector, special summoning. Like these are all cards that people who are aware of modern Dragon Link are still familiar with because the engine has been cooked down to just like the Rocket, the Rocket Tracer, the Absa Router, the boot sector, and then like the other Rocket Synchron Recharger. You know, a lot of the structure deck introduction cards. I would say that the pieces that this deck introduced were the meta-relevant cards. I don't think that the deck, as in isolation, was the
Rockets
success.
was not a meta deck.
No.
Rockets had good cards.
But I also think without Rocket Tracer, Dragon Link would never have been a deck. I think it would have been a good deck. I don't think it would be what we.
It would have been what it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, because there's no tuner access.
This is definitely an example of a deck though, where like it's a good structure deck in the sense that it introduced like those 5-6 cards for another strategy, and it was one of those ones where every Dragon Link player would buy 3 of the structure decks just for the ease of getting those cards. Like, and that in a way is a good structure deck, but also kind of ignores like the fact that they printed like an irrelevant boss monster for the structure. Like it's one of those weird like balances.
Well, total tangent. The boss monster was also mistranslated, so it was worse in the TCG than it was in the OCG until Battles of Legend got announced.
That's true.
But this was a very interesting one. I mean, to be honest, like this was more of a purchase for a lot of players because you had cards like Imperial Order, Twin Twisters. You had there was just like some really Red Reboot was in there because these are all cards that Revolver used in the anime. So of course you're going to be in there. So it was like a matter of like you got a really cool inclusion to your Dragon strategy and really easy access to
Link Turret.
Yeah, sorry, Mirror Force
Launcher. Come on, Magic Cylinder. Such good reprints.
Yeah, so you had a lot of like incredible like reprints in the deck that kind of like in tandem worked. I mean,
Borrowload was actually
Borrowload was a good reprint.
This was like $100 when it came out.
Yeah, no Borrow's Sword, which was what everyone complained about. But that's okay. I think Rockets, good cards, not the deck strategy, but they definitely provided Dragon Link with the tools that we know today.
We did kind of leave out a lot of the decks that were just like you take this one card out of it and then leave the rest of the deck. But this one I think felt particularly relevant because Dragon Link was good for like 4 years. And like I said, I think without Rocket Tracer, that deck would not have been if you interrupted them, they wouldn't just be able to go, ha, quick launch, Borreload, Savage Dragon, pass.
And I think we'll just quickly mention the one that I'm thinking of would be the Gear one. Like it was kind of like it came out a little bit past where the format was, and it got the one card, I think Gear Ogre, and like it was okay, but like no one really bought that deck and played forever and did really well at the time. Like
still got one at work.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sick, might get it. Gear Ogre is a good card.
Yeah,
And then seems fitting to end on the last one here. Shadow Steve. This was actually, funnily enough, a deck that we all bought when it came out because this deck rocked.
So this is your most recent getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh deck, right, Joe?
Yeah. So this one here is the one that like is responsible for getting me back into the game again last year. Because I was like unsure about playing Yu-Gi-Oh again. I heard rumors like before I quit the last time about the Shaddoll structure deck coming out in the OCG, and that's the last thing I remember. For some reason, I don't even know why. I think it was like lockdown and talking to the missus about Yu-Gi-Oh that got me back into it again. But I looked online and I was like, the Shaddoll structure came out. Let's have a look at the cards. And I was just like blown away. As soon as I read Wendy, I'm like, okay, I'm getting back into it. I don't even care about like, even if it's not meta relevant or whatever, which it was, but like, it was a really good example of a structure deck that, and I correct me if I'm wrong again, but like, I don't feel like there's many other structure decks like it, where there's a really good strategy from a core set from years ago that has received the structure deck, like
it's the only
in
one.
this way.
It's probably, I think, the one of most notoriety. Like this was, I think, Shaddoll. We knew Shaddoll was good. They were dominant during the Duelist Alliance format. And the only thing that they were struggling with in 2020 when this deck was released was keeping up with the meta. Because, yes, we acknowledge Shaddoll Fusion is probably one of the most incredible spells ever printed for an archetype. That wasn't enough anymore.
Yeah, you have to go second for it to be good.
You have to go second, so you had to do different setups, and Ash Blossom didn't exist when Duelist Alliance was around, so ashing a Shaddoll Fusion was never a concern.
Shaddoll Dinos and Shaddoll Trains topped.
Yes, yeah,
before
because of the use of Earths and, things
Shekinaga
like
that.
that.
But like,
Shekinaga was crazy, but this, I would agree, that just shot them forward into the modern day.
it sped them up.
Shekinaga a 10?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't even think about that. That's a level 10 machine.
What I would say is it plugged the holes that it needed to be plugged to like bring it forward into the modern era. And like we saw, I know it wasn't in the structure, but like Schism was a card that came out not long or afterwards that like was then allowed to like be played with an Aquilone, where like you would send that and you could search a trap that was insane. Like that's huge for the strategy. Like it needed these cards. Like even the like the negation of Aquilone was like huge. Like that's it didn't have that before. Like it's a permanent negation on the card. Like it didn't have that effect in the deck otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that this was like, again, like I feel like if this is what we're gonna see revamped structure decks moving forward to be, this is the model I would like to see being continued, because there was no need to kind of hard reset Shaddoll's strategy. They just simply added to its efficacy and consistency. And, they did a beautiful job with including different attributes for your main deck so that your fusions could do other things, not that you're really summoning Wendigo or Anartilis, but, that they gave you the attributes for App Cologne and the Reshadol Incarnation. We've watched how incredible construct loops are with Reshadol. If you just keep summoning back construct off a Reshadol, that's incredible, because you just keep fueling up your hand and then your opponent can't beat over it. And then, it goes to grave, I guess I'll add back the Reshadol and do it again. There was never, it just was such a consistent resource loop. And this really did bring Shaddoll forward into this MR4, MR5 game.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned MR5 as well, because something interesting about this deck, and it ties it back to the first one we talked about, was the time it came out. Because the Agent deck benefited hugely from Xyz monsters, because Mystical Shine Balls were kind of useless before that. You could use them as synchro material, but Venus is not a tuner, so tough to kind of justify that. And Shaddoll's came out or at least this deck came out in the cusp of Master Rule 5, but it also benefits hugely from link monsters. Like Gravity Controller is the best honorary Shaddoll card ever printed.
Cross Sheep at the time for the arrows.
Cross Sheep, and just like being able to put your Shaddoll monsters in grave voluntarily was immense for the deck, especially with a new card like App Cologne that searched when it was sent to graveyard. I know everything just lined up for this deck really nicely.
Not to mention as well, Aerial. Like we're forgetting that one card. Like that card in any grave format, like where the graveyard is important, is going to be insane. Yeah. And you see it like played in like a really small engine and like lots of other decks at the moment. Like anything that can like play Dogmatica, that can search the Aqualone, that can search the Aerial or search like a Schism, plays it, right? Like it's just such a good card. Like banishing 3 cards, like DD Crow ×3, like that's nuts. And not even to mention that it's
free discard as well.
Its flip effect gave you a combo as well. Like, it's such a good card.
Huge. And it's the kind of good card that you don't immediately read and go, oh, they got to ban this card. Like, it's very fair.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of commitment. It doesn't just trigger if it's sent to grave. It has to be by a card effect. But, it still has the power to carry the deck. Maybe in a format where it would be weaker. Like, I don't think Shaddoll have a lot of graveyard interaction before this. Kind of minimal.
No, not really. Yeah.
No. At most, you were bringing stuff out from like a Falco. Like
your grave was more important.
Your grave mattered more than your opponent, than interrupting your opponents, and this was like the perfect way to bridge it.
A lot of these decks also really highlight kind of the weakness of a deck and aim to fix it. And I think the good ones we've talked about all have that quality, where like the Monarch one understood the difficulty of tribute summoning in a modern game, so they gave you so much help with additional normal summons. The Dinosaur deck understood that the deck was inconsistent with searching, so it gave you a much more, consistent one-card search engine. Like all of these decks, I think, really understand that, which makes them so compelling, especially for new players who want just like a nice compact thing to get into the game with.
Yeah, and not to mention as well that like Konami know as well, because like when they released the Shaddoll structure deck, it was around the same time as Super Poly coming off the ban list, so they can they can definitely like build these structures. And I'm going to talk about the possibility of like a Satellar Knight one that you guys obviously know I've spoken about before. Like they could bring out Ptolemaeus from the list and make a Satellar Knight structure deck. They could do it with so many things that are on the ban list. Like I think we spoke about X-Sabers as well being another possibility. Like they know, and I feel like Shaddoll is the perfect example of a modern structure deck, and it needs to carry on like that. However, it hasn't so far. Like, and we've seen some really bad ones. Yeah.
You could make the argument they've gone for similar eras, like they've gone for hidden arsenal decks, like Dragunity, like Ice Barriers. But where they missed the mark is neither of those decks were ever good. Like Dragunity had its time with other dragon decks, but it was never like
the Dragunity deck was the winning deck. Yeah.
And Ice Barriers has always been a joke, like as a deck. Trishula being the exception with like Brionac and Gungnir and all the synchros. Like the actual main deck monsters are trash.
There's no strategy there. Yeah.
There's nothing.
There is no strategy.
And that's disappointing from the new decks anyway.
We saw it as well with the Spirit Charmers as well. And a little bit with the Cyber Strike one, but I'd say that one there has been a slightly better improvement. Like at least you can put 3 of those together and it's a playable deck. Like it didn't give heaps more than what it had before. Like, and I feel like that's where they missed the mark with that deck personally. Like it didn't add another strategy and like it didn't add enough good cards. I think there's like 2 cards that are being used now in like a Cyber Dragon strategy. Like
maybe even
about that.
As his replays.
No, but like when you talk about Shaddolls, like you have like Wendy, Aqualone, Aerial, Reshido, Incarnation. You have all these cards that like just made the deck, and that's what they need to do. And like it's real. It sucks that they've wasted product with like with these, like especially for new players. Like because if you're a new player coming into the deck, coming into the game right now, you don't have a lot of options like out of the box.
No, and I think, what we've seen kind of listed back on a lot of these structure deck rewaves / these decks that have had a lot of success is that they breathed life into or reinvigorated existing strategies. They didn't try to make a new one. They knew that dinosaurs are good at OTKing. Let's make that easier and fun to search. We know zombies care about the graveyard. Let's benefit that kind of a strategy. we know Shadows are a fusion-based strategy. They didn't try to make Shadows like an Xyz-based deck with this deck. They followed the pathos of we are improving on what already exists. And I feel like, decks like the Spirit Charmers and the Ice Barriers, there was no strategy to base their decisions off of. It was just, I guess we have to make something that's like decent. And there was, when you're pulling from nothing is, I think, where we see these kind of structure decks flop. And,
Yeah, with the Ice Barrier one, they were like, we're going to fix the fact that Ice Barriers can't even summon Trishula. And everyone goes, summoning Trishula is not enough these days. Yes, the new deck can summon Trishula really easily. You still get blown out by every other deck if you do that. And that's part of the issue with the new decks, is that they have holistically tried to solve the deck's inconsistencies, but haven't really addressed the fact that like doing the thing the deck tried to do also doesn't help.
And what's your play going first with that? Like, you trished them for 1?
Yep.
What?
That's it.
Okay,
Sick.
cool.
Yeah,
nice.
Cool. Love that.
Yeah, like carry on. Yeah. So like,
hope you hit the right card.
The only one that I would say that like kind of hit, like, it was okay would be the Sacred Beast one that they brought out. Like, at least that had some sort of strategy, and like, it was okay. It's definitely nowhere near any of the structure decks we've spoken about in the podcast. Like,
no,
it can be thrown in with the others. But yeah,
this was a deck you saw played with Eldritch, which was an expensive meta deck.
Yeah,
I don't know if that
Sacred
counts.
Beast Eldritch. And also, again, like, it didn't fix the problem. It was just like, oh, we've made these boss monsters too hard to summon. Guess we'll cheat them out of the deck. That's not fixing the problem of the deck.
Yeah, and like Hamon Pass is still not great.
Yeah,
even with the new stuff, like, doesn't quite do it. So if you were like recommending, I mean, this is like part of why we wanted to have this discussion. Like, if you were recommending someone new how to get into the game, we just talked about like every good structure deck in history, some of which I think we would say at the time were great ways to get into the game. What would you say now?
Right now, like, it depends on if it's a brand new player coming into the game. I would probably send them along the lines of maybe like just buying singles or free of the Sacred Beast, just because it's a simple strategy that they could do okay with. Like, I'm going to say okay. Megatins as well, yeah. Cheap. That's what I mean with the singles. Like, I'd probably put them onto something like a Tri-Brigade deck, because it's like simple. The strategy is get your Revolt out, use Revolt. Like, but if it was a returning player coming to the game, so they have like some knowledge of the game, I would still tell them to go buy free Shaddoll structure decks, buy some Torrential Tributes, buy some of the Paleozoic Trap, and just run a Trap Shaddoll build. Because like that's good, and it's out of the box, and it's cheap. It's a good way of getting into the game. Like, and you see them like going up all the time on like some of the Facebook pages, like really cheap Shaddoll bases. Like, so
it's a shame you can't buy the deck in store. It's sold out.
Yeah,
everywhere that I know.
But I mean, that you can definitely access the cards, and they were in the tins as well. So like, the extra cards you need are like in the tins. Like, you can get a cheap Schism now. Like, it's not a $30 paywall. It's like what, $5-10 now. Like,
I think that. So,
yeah, so like, that's what I would do anyway. I don't know about you guys, but yeah.
I would probably be on the same vibe of just like singles are, I think, probably your best bet at this moment in time. Because I mean, again, like, you're looking at more of an insular purchase with the January ban list kind of looming. You're not so like, crushed about having to like waste, or like not so much waste, but more like focus unnecessary energy to subpar strategies. You can kind of take things that are more successful and going forward. I think also with the upcoming Burst of Destiny, the existence of those deck building archetypes are quite accessible as well. Yes, you're in the caveat of, I have to buy a new deck and then buy all the staples that are missing for it. But that's, unfortunately, that's usually what structure decks kind of mitigate. And at this moment in time, there's nothing that structure decks are kind of providing that would be a more effective use of someone's money.
When people come to me and ask, like, how do I get into the game? I usually have two approaches. I either want them to, like, I would actually recommend someone getting into the game now, go out and buy like the newest deck if you want to get into it for serious play. And the reason for that is it'll give you the longest amount of time before it's banned, right? Like, there's no point picking up a deck just before it gets banned, because you don't get time to learn it. But if you're getting into the game now, I'd be like, go out and buy Sword Soul when it comes out. It'll be expensive, but you'll have like a year and a half to play it.
And it's relatively linear.
It's relatively linear and simple. Or I'd recommend buy a deck that they've just decided that will never get banned. So I would always recommend Dinosaurs, because that stuff just stays good. And even now with one of its cards at 1 Miscellaneousaurus, the deck is still playable. And like if you just want an eternal deck, like Dinosaurs is probably always going to be good. Just because the generic support is so strong. So I tend to angle those ways. Obviously, like stuff like Shaddoll has persisted through multiple ban lists, I think is also, like you said, a safe bet. Where I would resist telling people to get into like decks that were just reprinted in the tins is they would have to know which decks were more likely to get hit. Like Drytron is likely to take another hit on the ban list before time is up. So getting into that deck now might still be like a needlessly expensive exercise in something that isn't going to give you that much play time. Same with Tri-Brigade. I think Tri-Brigade's probably had all the hits it's going to get, but it could get another one. So that is risky.
Like, at least with Drytron, like the Diviner will probably stay okay for like longer. So like the major investment point would be okay. But yeah, like I wouldn't recommend Drytron to a new player for sure. Like, yeah.
No, far too complex.
This is where I feel like Konami have a massive hole in the market. And I've always been jealous of Pokemon TCG and Magic and stuff when they do the Worlds decks. And I feel like that's something that they need to bring to Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you can like buy these decks out of the box that have like a extra aside and are fully built with competitive cards. Make them so obviously you can't use them in official tournaments like Pokemon do because it will like just it just ruins the market if you do that. But like it doesn't like it gives players like a chance to like build these decks that they can't afford to at least get a taste of what the meta's like and what play-in meta is like.
Yes.
So,
and what 2020 Worlds deck would you give people? No, There is no 2020 Worlds deck. That's the joke. Sorry, everyone.
I know with Pokemon they do like a top 4 or a top 8. And like they print like all of the decks that like, and there's no reason that Konami can't do it. They definitely have the power and like the capacity to do it. Like, can you imagine if like we have Worlds next year, and there's like say Sword Soul, Flunder. No, I'm going off the top of my head, but there's a Sword Soul, a Flunder, and like Tri-Brigade or something that all top with like Forbidden Droplets and all of these expensive cards just in there. And you can just go to the shop and you buy them at like $25 each or whatever. They have everything. And you can play them against your mates and you can like have a bit of fun. But like you can't use them in official tournaments. You still need to buy the cards. So like I feel like it would be such a cool thing for Yu-Gi-Oh! To implement.
Agreed. And they do the thing where like the players even have their signature on the cards or something.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool for the players to like, you know, kind of live down the legacy of your deck being like immortalized in these World Championship decks. A friend of mine bought like a Force of Will in Magic the Gathering for Commander. That is a championship deck, and it has like the signature. It's cool to see.
It's cool. Like imagine
these
like
names from 20 years ago be immortalized.
You have like a Lucas Flynn like signed
Virtual
Worlds deck, you know, something like that. It would just be like so cool to see. Like, and you can imagine the pride that you would have as a player having a Worlds deck printed after you, like with your name and signature on it. That would be awesome.
That would be really sick. Or even if not that, like do what Magic does and print what they, you know, consider to be meta decks, but they just leave out like play sets of the good cards. You know, so they still build you the deck of the commons and uncommons, and it's like, okay, we'll put one of the secret rare in this. You know, just so that like, and make it cost $45, $50. So you don't tank the price of the secret rare. But, you know, for people who don't want to immediately commit to like, I don't know how to build a deck. The deck is pre-built, you know, with a side and an extra deck. And all you have to do, if you like the deck, is just pump it up full of more copies of the expensive cards.
Yeah. That is what is unique about Yu-Gi-Oh! In a way, though, with like the deck building. Like, I don't feel like the other TCGs have the same sort. I mean, they do, but like Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the eternal format. Like, we're the only ones that have it. Like, and deck building is huge in Yu-Gi-Oh! And like the structure decks, like, are a really good base point to like start to learn how to build your own strategies, like how to put in your own decks. Like it gives you a base, and like I do like that, but like. And I don't know if you brought those sorts of products in, if it would like lower people's deck building, I guess. Like, because for me, I'm a bit notorious for like net decking at times. Like, and I need to get out of that habit. Yeah. But like,
let's see how it does.
And then I adjust it from there. I do adjust from there, but yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, this game is hard enough to keep up with just from a pilot perspective. I think having to independently work out every synergy, like, you know, a lot of the people building early Adamancipator lists were helpfully providing the lists of good rock monsters that no one knew about because no one remembered, Go Go Go.
Power Giant, Go 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 Gigas.
Yeah, like these cards fell to the wayside for a reason, and there's definitely a bypassing with the internet around. It's cool though, Ruben, and I think you'll agree that some of the old decks are still playable.
Yes, and I think that's what makes Yu-Gi-Oh so unique is that is still something you can do today. Like we are literally going to see people playing the Agent of Mystery Earth again.
It's still good.
For the first time in 9-10 years. You have people who played Grapha 7 years on from its release. Like I think that's what makes Yu-Gi-Oh so interesting. And I mean, I would like to see these strategies a bit more accommodated for, a bit more provided some support for. And I don't think it's a lot to ask. Again, I don't think it's a lot to ask.
I think it's a selling point for Yu-Gi-Oh.
Exactly.
How many Magic players constantly go, I wish I could play with, I really miss fetch lands in Standard. I miss playing with, Ponder. I miss all these just kind of staples that haven't been reprinted. And Yu-Gi-Oh's over here, you can still play Stratos, baby. It's been 15 years and we're still normal summoning Stratos.
You can literally still play Vanilla Dark Magician from its release in 01.
And it's affordable. It's not on the reserve list. Thank God. Could you imagine?
No. I think as well, that is very unique with Yu-Gi-Oh! With the fact that for me personally, it took me coming back because I saw a deck that I really, really liked back in the day, come back. And you just don't see that in other TCGs as much,
No.
And there's hope as well. If you have, if you've been sitting on an X-Saber deck, or if you've been sitting on a Satella Knight deck, or a Dark World deck, or something along those lines, there's always that hope in the back of your mind. You're like, I wonder if this is going to get support one day. I wonder if this is going to get a structured deck that's going to bring it forward again. And that's what I love about Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah. And that's what makes structured decks cool and the products that we would like to recommend to people. And I think that, there's a lot of future potential releases that will be exactly that what we've described, and I hope that we move away from the clunkers that we've seen in recent history, unfortunately.
I just hoping the Fallen of Alba structure deck is good.
Yeah, Alba Strike.
Please.
Please
reprint a DS7 in there too. Why not?
Yeah,
give the budget players something.
Still make them buy Albas though. You got to give some.
Yeah, I mean Albas can be $100, whatever.
Yeah, that's fine. Not a problem.
Anyway, that has been our recollection, history lesson, assessment
of the meta relevance of
structure decks.
And if you think that we left out a meta-relevant structure deck, please let us know.
If you're an angry Lair of Darkness player that wants us to really talk about Lair of Darkness structure deck, I left that out on purpose. You can contact us at thefacedowns@gmail.com. That's thefacedowns@gmail.com. We're all lonely. We need friends.
Please, one question.
And even if you're a new player, just wanting to know something about the game, it doesn't have to be anything to do with what we talked about. Just feel free to ask. We're here to help. Yeah.
I will judge you.
Ruben's an official judge that can answer ruling questions. If you just want to send him ruling questions, he loves it.
And in the future, I think we're definitely looking at doing a Q&A sort of podcast. So fire any questions.
So get those questions fired in.
Come on, people.
Why do you always keep your curtains open in your apartment? It's weird.
Jesus.
And you go, do you want to play some cards? Yeah.
You had an interesting breakfast this morning. Huh? I don't know why we're on this. I think we're looking out at the city while we do this podcast.
Yeah.
I don't trust all you people. We've been inside for so long.
But yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, so
outro.
Outro, Lucas.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. I'm Lucas.
I'm Ruben.
And I'm Joe.
And you've been listening to The Face Downs.